Kia ora koutou. Ko wai tēnei he uri ahau no te taitokirau, no te nota. So mihi kia koutou ngā te taitokirau collective. So my whakarofo Ngā Hua. I'm glad to see that we have some water. That's a Ngā Hua from my kōrero yesterday. I guess in terms of me, Ngā Hua or outcomes really is about, I saw the brief on our introduction, and actually Ngā Hua is what whānau determine as Ngā Hua. Oh. What they determine is their journey, and our job really as Whānau Ora providers is to understand how we show their progression from their view and their lens. That is what Ngā Hua is for us, and when we talk about impact and insights, our job is really to understand the changes that they make, and for us to be able to exhibit those changes from their worldview. So when we talk about Ngā Hua, we have to be really creative and really think differently about the reporting of outcomes, the reporting of measurements, and the reporting of impact, and really look through it through the lens of whānau and what that looks like for them, how we tell their story through their lens, or how, more importantly, how they tell their own story. And then how we capture that for ourselves and as accountability back to whānau, because we're not accountable to funders at the end of the day, we are accountable back to the whānau that we support. So Ngā Hua is all about how we tell their story, how we support them to tell their story through their lens and not through a funder lens. So for me, that's what Ngā Hua means in this hui today.
Tēnā koe, Jacqui. I love that creative change, and we've actually heard a few of our kai kōrero over the last couple of days speaking about the creativity. Even if I can refer back to Waylon earlier, even talking about how they honoured and valued their staff and the way that they cover now their insurances. Those creative practices grow us as a people too. Ka huria nai nei kia koe, Rachel. He whakaaro wau?
Just following on, I'd just like to acknowledge Whānau Ora and all the providers, because somewhere along the way we break the rules and we break them for our whānau. And one of the things is, and I know that Ngā Taunui did, is that we continue to serve our people through the pandemic, regardless of the rules at the time, and it's about ensuring that we can reach out to our whānau no matter what, and to ensure that their outcomes and voices are heard. So I'd like to just acknowledge that. So kia ora.
Kia ora. Rahera?
Kia ora mai tātou katoa. Nei rā te mihi atu kia koutou, tai mai nei tēnei wā. Ki te arawa waka me waka, Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency. Ka puki mihi kia koutou. Mo tō manaakitanga kia mātou, i ngā rā kua pahure, me tēnei rā, tēnei te mihi aroha kia koutou katoa. Ko waio, yeah. Ko Rahera Hapi-Moresi, he uri tēnei, i tēnei taha, te tāo tōku mama, ko rangitāne ki Manawatu, i tēnei taha te tāo tōku pāpā, ko Ngāti Kahunganuki Heretanga i Ngāri, ko te awahau Foxton, yeah, Foxton, tōku ka Ngā Tūturu. Anyone else from Foxton? Sorry. Ngā Hua. I hope you don't mind, I'm going to go on a bit of a hikoi. So for me, whoops, and I'm going to take this with me. For me, Ngā Hua are all these pou in action and the outcomes of ngā pou. Mana motu hake. When I look at this pou, for me, it reminds me of that nuclear structure, going back to the traditional structures of whānau. Pepe at the centre, surrounded by all the mama, all the papa, all the nannies, all the kuia. And you would have heard Whaikiri talk about yesterday, let's return to the marae. Let's go back to the pā, because that's where whānau thrive. So when I see mana motu hake, it reminds me that Whānau Ora is whānau-centred, that whānau have the mandate to design the solutions of their own well-being. Then I move in here, ngā tūmanakohanga, ngā moemoe piki hia te pautama. And for me, that talks about whānau reaching new heights. Te tihi o Ruahine, Whānau Ora Alliance. And actually, piki hia te pautama is our workforce advancement strategy. So it's lovely to see that represented here. And this pou here, te matataki, it reminds me that Whānau Ora is whānau-led.
Aye.
led by the whānau, here at the head, supported by the rest of their whānau. Yes, you may play a role there, but they look to whānau first. And that formation has whānau at the lead, supported by all their whānau behind them. And then we go into tūhono. Now, tūhono for me reminds me of Te Ara Whānau Ora and our model of practice when we work alongside whānau, our model of engagement. The reason is because within Te Ara Whānau Ora, we talk about te here tangata. Tuia te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. And that talks about the people we have, the people we need, and the people we may need to manage differently. And they may be the services, but it's determined by the whānau. Again, whānau-led, whānau-centred. And then, my favourite, ngākau Māori. I look at that and I think of our kai whakaarara, our kai turiki, our kai arahi, our Whānau Ora navigators, who carry a unique set of skills. And this morning you would have heard, I think it was Pāhinari, Minister, sorry, Minister, he talked about a change is coming. And immediately I thought of our kai whakaarara because they are agents for change, so bring it on. And I think about that ngā kaumahaki because it takes a unique kind of person to be able to support whānau, to walk alongside, not in front, because that's the whānau, to walk alongside whānau, to support that journey of success, whatever it looks like for whānau. And then Ngā Hua. I've already described what that looks like. That's all these pau in action, but that's Ngā Hua to me. And Ngā Hua is our kai whakaarara, our Whānau Ora navigators, doing the mahi alongside of whānau, whatever that looks like for them, reaching new heights, whatever it looks like for whānau, creating pathways of least resistance, whatever that looks like for whānau. And you've heard over the days about our whānau take steps forward, they take steps back, they take steps. Any step is a learning opportunity. That's Ngā Hua for me. Yep, kia ora.
Okay, well that's our session for Ngā Hua completed. Hard act to follow, but right there it encapsulated how we move. And we move as one. So nei rā te mihi ki a koe te tuakana. O waihonga koro whakamutunga ki a koe, Geoff, e pāna ki tēnei. Then I'll see if we've got questions. Don't forget, this is the panel to ask your questions of.
Kia ora no tātou. Ngā mihi mahana ki a tātou, ko waiau, ko hikurangi te maunga, waiapu te awa Ngāti Parau te iwi, ko Geoff Milner tōku ingoa, tūmo ake Ngāti Hene Hauora. You know, when I was asked to join this panel, and it had a really specific brief around outcomes and goals and mechanisms, I said to myself, I think I'm on the wrong panel because as a CEO, I'm not as close to the frontline action as our everyday kaiarahi. So I've taken a bit of a strategic look at the kaupapa and really some thoughts around, there's a real renaissance on telling the pūrākau of different hapu and iwi that are happening, a re-indigenising of every space. But I think in Whānau Ora, even with the pūrākau of the likes of Ngāti Hene, is that their story, as they see it, through their eyes, is the most important story that we need to see in terms of outcomes and goals for them. I think in the world beyond just Whānau Ora, we're so focused, sometimes with even methodologies, that actually we need to provide the space where whānau tell their story in their way, in their language, in their circumstance, and even simplify their ability to just kōrero, to capture on a video, and articulate a goal that in many, in a different world may seem small, but for many people who may not have even achieved a goal through school, achieving a goal is a sign of confidence to go to the next step, to go higher, which is what Whānau Ora, in my view, is about, is unlocking the moi moia and allowing our people to dream. As part of a leadership team, a key goal of mine is to create the environment where the real stars of Whānau Ora, the kaiarahi, supported by the back office team, can thrive. And so some of the factors that I looked at, that was that mechanisms word was around, do we have a methodology that gives a foundation for kaiarahi to practice and lift their frame of reference, and Dr. Kitty outlined Te Kaua or Whānau Ora, which I think is a great practice. But first and foremost, we need kai mahi who have the nākau and the heart to do this mahi. You can have all the methodology in the world, but if the kai mahi hasn't got the heart to go hard, to go as long as it needs to advocate, to hustle, then I think the hard mahi, people could become very disillusioned with it. So I think cultural competency of that workforce from a heart perspective is really important. And then do we have organisations where Whānau Ora, the po that was articulated, actually thrive, or is Whānau Ora just another contract within our organisations? And I think that's a challenge that I want to put out to all of us here today. Is Whānau Ora just another business unit in your organisation, or is Whānau Ora and the imperatives infused through your health, through your social services, through your housing, through your justice? Because I tautoko the kōrero that the magic of Whānau Ora permeates all of that. But within our organisations, are we limiting that magic for whānau just to it exists over there where our kaiarahi sit? So I think those are the things that as a leader within Ngāti Hine Health Trust is to create that environment where first and foremost whānau feel that they can trust us to approach us, and then secondly, when they approach us through kaiarahi, that there's a workforce that is magic, as that waiata says. But more importantly, within our workforce, our kaiarahi don't become just a dumping ground for our other workforce who say, I only do this, the clinical stuff, but you do that. Because within Ngāti Hine Health Trust, we've adopted every kaimahi as a navigator, and then you bring your 15 to 20% clinical support. So I think that's a contribution to that kōrero. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, o tira tēnā koutou. Encouraging everyone to pick up your phone and pop a little question up here so that we can fulfill our time and keep us all awake. But I do actually have a question, because we're sitting in Te Puia. This is our mecca of tourism. It got closed down as a direct result of COVID and the pandemic hitting us. And many of our staff were left without a job. Many of them have become Whānau Ora navigators or have moved into the health area because that was where the greatest need was. And they also knew how to connect with our whānau. So when I think about Ngā Hua, and I'm looking at opportunities also for our whānau who may even be on a totally different trajectory when it comes to their work pathways. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've been able to sustain those pathways of work as a hua moving forward, and also perhaps some of the outcomes that you've already seen and have had demonstrated through kaimahi that you've brought on specifically to deal in this over the last couple of years? So tēnā pēr ka tīmata I a koe.
Kia ora anō. Actually, this is quite an exciting question. Our whānau, yes, they experienced some challenges, and you would have heard Vanessa talk yesterday about how do we maintain the aspiration. And our kaiwhakaarara are so skilled at doing that. Our Whānau Ora navigators are amazing. Moving away from that crisis and into aspiration and maintaining that aspirational focus the entire time. Yes, we are going through what we're going through, but what is the learning and where are we heading? And what is the role that you will play in that transformational change? And for us, with our kaiwhakaarara and the whānau that they were working alongside, even though we were impacted by an isolation, our kaimahi found ways to continue to engage, to keep that aspiration on top for all whānau at all times. One of our kaiwhakaarara said, whānau really just want to see somebody. Can we reorientate our services? Can we do driveway hui? Why not? So they found a way to continue to do their mahi, to continue to work through the plans, to continue to address what matters to whānau as opposed to what's the matter with whānau. And they continue to work to their dreams and aspirations and their plans, keeping their plan at the forefront of everything. Yes, they were impacted. Yes, we know that whānau were impacted. But the hua of that, ngā hua of that, is that our kaimahi continued to meet the aspirations of our whānau. It was really important to them, because it's really important to whānau. That's what matters. Yep, kia ora.
Tēnā koe, darling. Jacqui, he whakaaro wau?
I'll talk about Waipareira. We call it a Te Kauhau Ora, and it's our value system that we implement across our whole organisation. So we have, 30 to 50 different contracts maybe, but everyone is brought on, and Te Kauhau Ora goes across everything. And actually your role at the end of the day is kaimahi whānau. Regardless of whether you're a nurse, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a social worker, actually your mahi is kaimahi whānau. That is the title, that is the mahi that you have when you come to work for us. We see many different hua for kaimahi, for whānau, so because we employ, as all of you do, kaimahi that live and breathe in your community, the hua is that they come to work for an organisation that is embedded in their community. So that when they work with whānau, they instill those principles and values within them. Through COVID, we had, as everyone else has, we redeployed. Our hua was, we got so many different lay vaccinators, we got so many different new nurses or doctors. Some would come to the vac centre and pretend that they were a doctor. But the hua for our kaimahi was they could do whatever they wanted and they were going to be supported to be able to do that. That was actually the hua that came as a result of redeploying a workforce. But they were surrounded by doctors, they were surrounded by nurses and with people that they wouldn't normally have contact with, and they actually became clinicians in their own mind. They became not only lay vaccinators, they became lay clinicians. So Ngā Hua was very evident for our kaimahi. We brought on a lot of volunteers from our community, and a lot of them were rangatahi. I think we had over 30 rangatahi that we brought on because they were wanting to do something, they wanted to contribute. So that, again, very different hua for them, increased confidence, increased ability to connect with their community. But we also have them now who are wanting to look at careers in medical industries, who would never ever have thought to be able to do that before. And they've been encouraged because of the people that they've come in contact with. So at the end of COVID, we have not realised what our hua will be. We are still designing what that hua will be for not only them, for our kaimahi who have themselves really gone to a different level because we take a risk on them, we support them to take risks, and they thrive under adversity and they thrive under uncertainty. So our kaimahi and our workforce, again, looks very different now. So that's been a real hua for Waipareira. So I think in terms of ngā hua, there's so many layers of hua and achievements and outcomes that we haven't begun to recognise or even begun to understand. And I think if we can continue to push boundaries, continue to grow our workforce into areas that we need, then we've still got many hua to flourish. So that's what I would say.
Tēnā koe, nei rā te mihi. Kia koe, Rachel.
We were actually impacted because we also have a Stratford Mountain House. So all the staff was redeployed to Whānau Ora or distributing, or they were either giving out kai and things like that. So we changed our kitchen to make sure that we had a hub. So we also have a berry farm, so with rangatahi, and they were also, some of them, the rangatahi especially, wanted to put their hands up, and they became vaccinators. So we actually had quite a few. One of the things we found when the COVID hit was our rangatahi was a struggle to get vaccinated, and we found if we trained rangatahi to do them, it worked. Somehow they trusted the young ones and not people that were our age or nurses or doctors and things like that. So we actually had a bit of a shift, and it actually upset our clinical staff because all of a sudden our nurses weren't vaccinating, but they had to supervise and all that kind of stuff. And it did become quite an unsettling period because, of course, if you've been through training and you're a nurse, so it actually was a bit of a flip. but in a good way, because everyone could actually do multiple jobs. And it became, actually, you didn't have to be an expert at such this. You could be, you could be just a student that's come out of high school and trained and qualified to for standing orders. Obviously, you have to have standing orders to vaccinate. That's one of the things we brought in and did. And we, I think we ended up with about 14 vaccinators that weren't qualified staff, but it worked. And so Vaccinax was stood up, and mainly it was run by a rangatahi with a couple of kaumātuas and a administration, and it worked for our community. And instead of going to the clinic, they were actually coming to the Vaccinax, which was quite interesting. So I don't know, sometimes it's about an and just making sure that we stand up and pathways. But from that, we actually found, like, we've rearranged our staff. So rangatahi are actually looking at working in the health sector and going to be trained nurses and things like that. So like pathways are really important, but opportunities, if you give them an opportunity, they take it. And that's one of the most important things, is that we do give our whānau opportunities. So kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Rachel. Now, Geoff, you spoke about cultural competencies, and whilst we've been through a time where perhaps we've taken on more staff to deal with the challenges we had across our communities. Around the cultural competencies, what have you done to ensure Ngā Hua have been fully intact?
Within Ngāti Hine Health Trust, 90% of our kaimahi are Māori, 90% are from the Rahera, and so there's a good starting block within our kaimahi in terms of those natural values. I think what we've found in terms of serving and supporting high needs whānau is that actually those cultural competencies need development on an ongoing basis. So taking things for granted is a recipe for redoing things. So within Ngāti Hine Health Trust, we're re-evaluating the whole recruitment process and the retention and the whole reinvigoration of existing kaimahi, and also being brave to shift people to where their natural strengths are. And so those might have been our nursing workforce, but now they're best placed in supervising, supporting and encouraging. And then through our appraisal system, we're on a journey to apply cultural competencies around the sort of po within Whānau Ora, or the Whānau Ora outcomes framework, that are the first measure of performance, and then those other technical skills become secondary. I think, to go back to the earlier question around the kaimahi, is that COVID was an incredible litmus test for us as leaders and for our kaimahi. You were either enthused and encouraged for such a time as this, our organisations were born, or you were terrified and you felt like, why am I doing all of this mahi when the world is shut down? So out of that process, we found the rising stars who just said, I'm here, use me, apply me. And then we've talked about workforce, people coming in between to become lay vaccinators, and we've kept those people on. And then I don't know about everybody here, but vacancies and filling workforce is my biggest challenge in Ngāti Hine Health Trust. And I've found in recent times that those with lived experience are some of the best kaimahi that we can ever get, because they bring the sort of experience that we're called to work within, but they're malleable, they're open, they're not know-it-alls who have been here, done that, and got all of this training. They're actually saying, I'm here to be moulded to how Ngāti Hine Hauora works. So those whānau with lived experience are an incredibly powerful workforce.
Look, really appreciate that, kōrero. Now, we do have a couple of questions, so thank you. Thank you to our virtual viewers, and also anyone in the room who has sent us through a couple, because this particular one, I think, touches on something that all of you have spoken about in terms of a response to it was a global pandemic. We've got many pandemics that are actually going on across Māori, a tātou. This question is around in addressing other health epidemics, pērā ia diabetes, or those that have long-term conditions. What do you believe will or should be the response with the already geared up workforce? Kei a wai tērā whakautu.
Oh, I'll have a go at that one, just to kick it off, is that I think when Aorangi was up, he showed KP Kevin Prime, who made a statement that before I can articulate good hauora to others, I need to exemplify what good hauora is for me first. So I think what I've learned out of COVID and the busyness, we all get busy, is just try and simplify things. And I think there's a big shift, and Rihanna talked about it, in terms of contracting, which allows us to simplify our communities. What are the priorities for them? Not what are the priorities the system says they want to purchase of us. What are those priorities that allow us to bring health prevention, promotion, and then more latterly an intervention at the end to shift those systemic diseases like diabetes within our communities. And I think the system just needs to pause and allow us to breathe and empower the likes of everybody in here to say, I'm going to choose this particular kaupapa this year and go deep in it and not go light across 10 things. So that's something we're giving thought to in Ngāti Hine Health Trust.
Tēnā koe, Geoff. Any other? Would like to answer that?
I suppose I'll add to that. Diabetes is an issue, I think, with most of our whānau. Or we know someone who's got diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2. I think it's really important that it comes down to addressing diets, exercise, the simple things that matter, but it's about how do we empower our whānau to do those things, and it's about walking, I suppose, beside them to help guide them in a way that enhances them, because if they're not going to buy into the program, you won't get the outcome. It's about them taking ownership of that program, signing them up, letting them drive it, because obviously they're getting to a point where they know that they're, diabetes, and hopefully their medication comes down. At the end of the day, they need to buy into the program.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to what matters to whānau. If diabetes is on top for them, then they're going to share that. And if they share that because their voice matters, then that's what you do. But if they're living with it because that's what they do, then we address what the aspiration really is. And the aspiration might be wellness, and this might be a pathway to achieving wellness, but actually wellness might look really different to someone living with diabetes. Wellness might be, my children are awesome, my children are going to school, my children get picked up, my moko are happy. When I think about one of the hua in the pandemic was just the mobilisation of all our Māori nurses. One of the hua was the mobilisation of our Raukawa District Māori wardens, who are so connected, and they address what matters to whānau too. And yes, there are a lot of underlying health or comorbidities out there for whānau, but they were addressing the immediate need as determined by whānau. And we do have a really geared up workforce. We've worked really hard, really hard to have a geared up workforce. And I appreciate and acknowledge all the mahi that they do. Even our Māori Women's Welfare League and the mahi that they did, especially in our district. I think about Te Awahau and our Māori Women's Welfare League in Te Awahau. The response there was so immediate. And they combined with our Māori Women's Welfare League at Ngāti Kaupata, and they addressed wellness and what that looked like to all the people that they're connected to, because they know the no. Our nannies know the no, and they'll tell you very quickly. And if diabetes isn't on their top list, then that's not what they want addressed. They want you to take care of their mokos.
Ka pai, tēnā koutou. We do have one more question on there, and that's around where to from here, which I think if we followed the path of Ngā Hua, we would already have outcomes. And I'm sure each of you would be able to talk about this particular kaupapa. So with our last 10 minutes, I'll leave it to our whānau up here to talk about where to from here as we aspire to seeing Whānau Ora move and transition into its next level up.
Yeah, I think the question where to from here for Whānau Ora is a fantastic question. Yeah. Within Ngāti Hine Health Trust, we're sold out on Whānau Ora. We're not sold out because it's a contract. We have lots of other contracts that are pūtea-wise much larger and much wider, but Whānau Ora is the seed within Ngāti Hine Health Trust that has the ability to transform our health, social housing, social services, our housing, our justice, mahi, because it's so simple. It's a framework that's built off of a Māori pedagogy. It's who we are. So we're incredibly excited about Whānau Ora, what it's done to date and what it's going to continue to do tomorrow. I hear, we're a movement. And I think the question I also ask in Tai Tokerau, are we a movement just because of our FTE, or are we a movement because we think we can leverage off Whānau Ora to achieve great things in the mainstream space? And so certainly within Tai Tokerau, being in the collective is more than just meeting data reporting, meeting kaiarahi FTE stuff. We are always gathering in Tai Tokerau to talk about Whānau Ora, but we're gathering to talk about Hau Ora as health. We're gathering to talk about strategic issues like the reform of the health sector. We're involved in a Tai Tokerau iwi Māori housing prototype called Te Pauahi. We're trying to talk to corrections and make sure that all their kupu Māori actually translates to reality inside the wire. So you can't lock our tāne up for 22 of 24 hours a day and think they're going to thrive with some Māori programs. So I think Whānau Ora is a glue that allows us to have conversations that in many respects we might not have conversations with each other. I love the fact in Tai Tokerau that under Ngā Tini Whetū, we were able to reintroduce Ngā Pui Iwi Social Services back into the Whānau Ora movement, and we're able to introduce Ngāti Kahu Social and Health Services under Ngā Tini Whetū. But again, our response to the changes in Ngā Tini Whetū is to say we've already created a relationship now. We must find ways to continue to build depth in that relationship, and it's not all about using Whānau Ora money. So we're going to have a conversation with MSD, who seem to fund, and we're a recipient of a whole lot of community connectors, and say, why don't you send that money towards collectives like ours, Tai Tamu, Tai Pari, and we'll grow the navigator workforce off the back of this. So I think Whānau Ora is incredibly powerful, and again, I just want to mihi to Merepeka, JT, and others who came to a hui in Otiria Marae in May 2021 around Hau Ora in the northern region. And that wasn't a gathering about Whānau Ora, that was a gathering about our voice has got a place. We've got some runs on the board, we've got something to contribute, and united we can achieve great things. So I'm incredibly optimistic about Whānau Ora moving forward. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Geoff. Jacqui.
Whānau Ora, the next iteration, what do I see it being? We've had a lot of conversations. I guess it is a movement for us. It's a political movement where I walked around here the other morning and I see faces like Marcia putting themselves on decision-making tables at different levels. I see that as being part of the Whānau Ora movement. I see the mahi that we've done with Oranga Tamariki and being able to push back on those government agencies, MSD to be the next one, Ministry of Education to be the next one. We as a movement need to make these government agencies accountable and actually at the end of the day say, we know what's best for our whānau, provide us with the pūtea and get out of the way and let us get on with the mahi. We have a workforce, we talked about a get up workforce. We have a get up workforce that I actually think we need to put more pressure on because they are ready to learn new skills. They've gone through this COVID period. They've realised, actually, we can do anything. We've been supported to do anything, so we need to be giving them more education, more information, so that they are able to do more with our whānau. We don't need to bring external people in all the time to do mahi for them. So the old community health worker or the old kaumahi that did everything, knew a lot of everything, and then navigated people towards that extra expertise. I think that's what we need to gear our kaiarahi up to do, the next iteration of kaiarahi. I think we need to be able to really push back on the training that our workforce has been given. I get emails from NRHCCC all the time to say, this is the training that's available for your staff now. Actually, Whānau Ora should be saying, this is the training that we need because we have seen the need in our community and this is what we will be delivering. And again, please get out of our way while we get on with what we need to do as a Whānau Ora movement. So the next iteration of Whānau Ora is very exciting. We've got the Māori Health Authority. I think we're on the cusp of some massive changes as a movement, and we just need to keep progressing, keep on putting pressure on, and really continuing to grind, because actually COVID has been, well, it's still happening, and the real hard mahi needs to happen now. So that's what I think the next iteration of Whānau Ora will be.
Tēnā koe, Jacqui. As a movement, ka neke atu ki te tihi o ruahine, kei a koe, Rahera.
Where to from here? We'll continue to reach new heights. We'll continue to pikihia te pautama. We'll continue to have whānau voice validate the mahi that we do, and whānau aspirations determine the direction we will go in. Whānau have pushed us into some spaces and places that we've been really privileged to be in. Housing, you would have heard Matiro talk about that today. That's Ngā Hua, that's whānau achieving their moemoeā, and we get to be part of that journey. And as we pikihia te pautama, you know, there's going to come a time when we don't need to continue that climb because whānau will climb it by themselves. And we get to watch the rise. How fortunate we are. But what does the future look like for Whānau Ora? I think it's thriving. You can see it already. We've become such a force to be reckoned with. And we'll continue to do that. It's a good fight. Yeah.
Kia ora, thank you, Rahera. Rachel.
Where to from here? I believe we should continue what we're doing, ensure that the whānau voice, but also we should be increasing our kaimahi and getting that funding that JT talked about this morning is pitiless. You know, it's embarrassing to hear what the funding is, and the government needs to hear our concerns, and we know what's best for our whānau. So we should be delivering that. It's actually quite hurtful to know what little we actually receive in Whānau Ora for the mahi you guys all do. Momai, really. Kia ora.
Kia ora, tēnā koe. We do have one final question, so up to whomever it may choose to answer this one. For the first time, we have a Māori clinical workforce, but it looks like contracts will not be going past December. What is your suggestions in this space around positioning, and how can Waka play a part in securing funding across the board? Kia waitira. And I'm not too sure where that's positioned, but Geoff?
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to philosophy. Do we jump because somebody has a contract to December or rolls it over to June? I start with that workforce that was put in place during the peak is still there where the volumes are a bit lower, are a valuable workforce tomorrow as they were in the peak of all of those wonderful numbers. So our challenge, given, as I said before, workforce within Ngāti Hine, finding workers is a big challenge as we grow. We've got to pivot that workforce into new places, transferable skills, and not just adopt the contract's going to end and therefore we exit that workforce. So if you're in leadership, that's your job, is to find solutions. Because we know the investment by the Crown and the COVID response, the taps are turned off. That's a reality. But there are so many more opportunities in mainstream that we just need to unlock that certainly we'll be doing our best to hold on to that workforce and find the mahi inside our trust, even if that's not in the clinical space initially.
Tēnā koe. Anyone else like to give that one?
I think my last answer probably encapsulated it. As a movement, just continuing to put pressure on, maybe look at how the Māori Health Authority can support in terms of the Māori clinical workforce. What does that look like? What is the support that they have in place, bringing them together under one entity, one authority potentially? How do we continue to support and grow them and then bring our young people through so that they have a voice and a pathway through to that? So.
Ka pai, well nei rā te mihi kia koutou. I'm also just mindful too, having stood up here and just listened to the kōrero and get that we're talking about Ngā Hua. And as a mama of a son with a disability, I sometimes think, where does Whānau Ora sit in that space? Because that's a huge gap. We have no Māori facility or organisation that support us. So I'll leave my vulnerability there, but he tino rua kia whai hua, ka pai? And I hope that the answer lies in the room. Here no, tira ko tira. That ends our session on Ngā Hua, and I nearly got teary on that one, but paki mai.